I'm Stacy Smith, and welcome to another edition of Politics 2021. I'm going to introduce our panelists right now before we get into our first subject. And the panelists, our great group of analysts, are former Republican Pennsylvania Governor Tom Corbett. He's also served as State Attorney General and the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania. Mr. Corbett now teaches law here in the city of Pittsburgh at Duquesne University. On the other side of the table is a former chairman of the State Democratic Party in Pennsylvania, Jim Byrne. Jim also served as chairman of the Allegheny County Council and as mayor of Millvale. Jim is an attorney here in Pittsburgh. Back on the Republican side of the table, we find Keith Schmidt. Keith's political background is strong, dating back to the Reagan presidency in 1980. Keith was the state director for former Republican Senator Rick Santorum, and Keith was also an advisor to Santorum's 2012 presidential campaign. Keith now has his own consulting firm. He's had it for more than a decade here in Pittsburgh. Now we turn to the great philosopher of around the table. That would be Joe Mystic. Joe, of course, is a familiar name in politics, especially Democratic politics across the state. He's had several roles in the city government of Pittsburgh, also served as deputy mayor. Joe teaches law at Duquesne University, and you can read his weekly column on politics and life in the Trib. And I would like to start with all of you about life here in the great state of Pennsylvania, as we're talking right now. The Washington Post ranked the states and how they're doing the vaccine. Pennsylvania came in the bottom 10 as far as distribution of the vaccine. Joe Mystic, what are your thoughts about that?
We've not done a good job in Pennsylvania. That's clear. It has nothing to do with politics. This is not a political issue. This is about life and death. Now, there are a couple factors here that may impact that, but still in relative terms, we're very low in the ranking. Governor Corbett has often said that one of Governor Wolf's principal problems is communication. So a lot of this may have to do with communication because it's been poor. I've only been a practicing lawyer for about 40 years, so I guess I can't be expected to understand how this is supposed to work. We read technical things every day, and none of us can make heads or tails of how to get a shot, how to schedule a shot. How are we going to get vaccinated? So that's part of it, communication. The other part is there's been no national leadership. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, FDR did not go to Congress and say, this is a day that will live in infamy. Now, I want each of the states to decide how you're going to fight this war individually. We fought the war together as a nation, and we need to do that. We've needed to do that, and I think we're going to do that now, so that may increase. But right here in Pennsylvania, we have to do a better job. Our neighbor, West Virginia, is showing us the way. They're doing a great job. So we better get on this quick.
Jim Byrne, your thoughts?
Yes, we're ranked 10th. The federal government has been woefully inept for all 50 states. We're still ranked 10th. Why? I think it is a communication issue. So the administration in Pennsylvania needs to be honest with itself. It cannot hide its head in the sand. It cannot deny the fact that we have been woefully inadequate and woefully inept in our distribution and administration of this vaccine. So study the film. Why are we ranked 10th? And be honest about what the data is telling you. And to the extent you're being advised by a cabal of people that perhaps don't know left from right, get people in the room that know what's going on, including Pima and others, on what we need to do to get this distribution rolled out and start getting these vaccines into the arms. I mean, when you see Democratic senators and representatives being critical of the Democratic governor, they're closer to the ground than we are sitting out here in Western Pennsylvania. They're seeing firsthand why this isn't working and why we are so woefully ranked. So look at why, be honest about why it says why or reads why, and fix it sooner rather than later. It's not complicated.
All right. Governor Corbett, I'm going to turn to you on this one. You were the governor of Pennsylvania. You were not faced with a crisis like we have right now. What are your thoughts on what is happening?
Well, but crises and emergencies all follow a certain course. There's magnitude, obviously. And I have been saying this since we started with this. Number one, as Joe said, communication has been absolutely terrible. And am I critical of the governor? Yes. The governor's not been out there to explain to the media how this is going to work. He's been doing it through spokespeople, but it all comes back to him. And they haven't explained to the people. If they would explain to the people, this is what our plan is, rather than just saying, here it is, people might be a little more accepting. However, what is the plan? I don't know. And I don't think anybody in the media knows at this point. Going to a computer and looking out to see how many places that you might be able to go get a shot is not a plan. Glenn Cannon, who was my director of PEMA and did the same thing here, used to say, plan for the worst, hope for the best. But hope is not a plan. And unfortunately, we have lost months and months and months, to my knowledge, that there was no plan that was really developed. We should have been planning from the day that we knew we had a pandemic as to how are we going to distribute it? Who's going to distribute it? And this is my criticism of the approach to this pandemic, was that the Department of Health was running it. Department of Health has a role on the health side. The Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency knows how to deal with emergencies. They connect to the counties on a regular basis. And assuming that we got the vaccine in from the federal government, bad assumption at this point, but assuming that it came in, how are we going to deliver it? Are we going to deliver it to, and I would have looked at using the National Guard immediately as part of it, setting up sites, not one big site that you're going to see 1,000 cars in line for, but multiple sites. But there are issues that I don't know of, the refrigeration and so forth. But please let us know what's coming. I think the people that are looking to go get it, I'm one looking to go get it. I'll wait, but just tell me what's going on.
Well, it's been very difficult. I've been one of those like you, Governor, trying to find a way to get the vaccine. And the way that it's rolled out right now, it's really up to the individual to figure it out more than almost the state. Keith?
Let me add one thing, Stacy. You know, one of the things that we have available to us if we had a plan, especially in Western Pennsylvania, in the rural areas and everything, are volunteer fire halls. Mm-hmm. You know, if you go back to when they came out with the oral vaccine, if I recall this correctly, and Joe, you go along with me, we had places, we didn't just go to a doctor, we had places like a fire hall or something that you could do a distribution of that oral vaccine. This really is no different.
Right. But we must say the federal government had absolutely nothing to do with the polio vaccine.
I agree.
Yeah, it was handled by the states and by individual medical personnel. Keith, you were the former state director for Rick Santorum of the Senate. I have a feeling that if you were still in that position, you would be being inundated right now with calls from Pennsylvanians.
And besides our staff on our larger offices, we had 8 offices in Pennsylvania. In Pittsburgh alone, we'd probably have 6 interns answering the phone in addition to staff. And I can tell you they'd be ringing off the hook right now, because there is a certain expectation of people in America that there is a role, a defined role, because of the immense resources governments at the state and federal level have, that they expect us to be better prepared. And I'm going to echo the thoughts of my 3 esteemed colleagues and probably repeat a lot of things they already said. But how in the heck are we where we are right now? From the moment the first pandemic was discovered, the preparation should have been laid in place on when the eventual cure gets here, how do we vaccinate the people in our state and our country? And obviously we're not there. And I echo everybody's true disappointment in Governor Wolf and his administration, but we're at the very beginning of this. Governor Wolf, I plead with you to look around, look just south of our border, as Joe Mystic said. Right now, apparently, the reviews on the distribution in West Virginia are through the roof, that they may be doing it better than anyone in the union. So travel south, accept the fact that mistakes were made early on, put a team together and figure it out. It's still early and we could still move from the bottom to the top. But there is some frustration of all the stories you hear around the nation. I have a number of my family members in Florida who have retired to Florida, who've lived there for some time. And one in particular, my brother-in-law, suffers from pulmonary fibrosis, in the final stages of pulmonary fibrosis, a respiratory disease that if he'd get COVID, it would likely, he'd have a hard time surviving. And he's 63 years old. And they have been trying since the time this has been announced, and I've been working with them with all my contacts in Florida. But because he's not 65, he can't get anyone's list. And I can tell you, there's a lot of 65 to 85-year-olds in Florida, but people with pre-existing conditions, as far as I'm concerned, especially pre-existing respiratory conditions, should be put on the same level as healthcare workers and first responders, because literally it could be a fatal diagnosis. But all this stuff, I only point that out in Florida. I know we're talking about Pennsylvania, but all of these things should have been talked about well in advance. Governors should have been on conference calls with the federal government. We should have this figured out. But folks, this whole lottery system of, I hope you get lucky enough to get a call back or don't get pushed off a website. It's crazy. Let's sit down calmly, deliberately. Let's figure it out. The people are depending on us.
Stacy, I just want to comment on what you had said about our earlier experience with vaccines. You know, society, it's a much bigger country now.
Yes.
And society is much more complex. And we did not have the means that we have now, the vehicles that we have now to do this on a national basis with a national strategy. And, you know, maybe this is heresy in my party, but yeah, I'd be a lot more comfortable if Governor Wolf were to pick up the phone and call Governor Corbett, put him in charge of the distribution of this vaccine. You know, let's get somebody there who focuses on nothing else and has the experience in the background to do it.
Kind of like a czar.
Yes.
We do in other areas. Yep.
Never use that word.
Don't use that word. Okay.
Emergency, Stacy, real quick. Emergency management in rollout of a plan. The algorithm stays the same. Whether you're the mayor of Millville rolling out a plan for Hurricane Ivan, or whether you're a governor or somebody else, the algorithm is the same. It starts with communication. It starts with having a cohesive rollout for whatever it might be. And it's something that the early steps could have been done on a foundation made in February or March. It didn't happen. But I do agree with Governor Corbett. Governor Wolf put the eggs in the wrong basket. He should have gone to FEMA. He should have rolled out the National Guard. He should be doing that right now and get us caught up. So there is an algorithm that could be used. He needs to use it.
So since we
and Joe, not only is it a good suggestion by my colleague Joe Mystic that you put somebody like Corbett in charge, but it's brilliant in that he has the experience. We all get that, but it would send the message that this isn't political.
That's
this
exactly
is
right.
Let's just get it done.
It will elevate this. It will elevate.
It would be an eloquent gesture to make the people feel like we're not playing politics here. We just want to do what's right.
Exactly.
So that's an interesting. I hope he watches tonight. I hope he watches the video. Somebody send this video to Harrisburg.
Okay. Well, before we finish this one, let me do this on since we do talk about politics. He obviously cannot run for re-election, but if he were up for re-election in 2022, how do you think he'd fare right now? Keith?
Well, the interesting thing is, be careful when anybody talks about being coronated. But right now, in a lot of the circles that I run in both Democrat and Republican circles, there is almost a feeling of a coronation for Josh Shapiro, that he has such he's running so strong in certain circles, his ability to raise money, his performance and his affinity, especially in the important vote-rich southeastern Pennsylvania. But the interesting thing is, in the last 6 months, 8 months, you're hearing people moving off that a little bit, because there is a concern that these very difficult second term of Governor Wolf may affect him in a negative way, and there could be a real chance for a change of party in the governor's mansion because of people's general dissatisfaction of how this particular administration has conducted itself in the last year or two, especially during this pandemic.
I have to go to Jim Byrne on this one. Jim, you were former state Democratic Party chairman. You're still tied to people. What are you hearing? Anything like Keith is?
I still think Josh Shapiro is leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else right now. There may be maybe the folks who were enamored with him may not be as enamored, but he's still the front runner. But again, we're in a vacuum. Who's the opponent? Is there going to be a primary? Who's on the Republican side? But standalone right now, Josh is a heavy favorite to get the nomination and win in November. But your question about would Governor Wolf win if the election were now, if he were to seek a third term, it depends on where we are in a year. I mean, people will tend to forget the moment that they're in. And the moment we're in right now is not a good one. But if he were to fix this, which I think he will do, I think they will do, whomever, people will remember the most recent thing. Voters are almost like creditors. You could have a great run, and then 2 weeks before your election, the bottom falls out. You're fighting for your political life. Look at George Bush, 91% after 9/11, or I'm sorry, George H.W. It was 90% when the Iraq War started in Kuwait, and then he lost. So I don't know. If it were tomorrow, he may be in trouble, but a year from now would decide.
I may disagree with you, just from my experience, and where I would disagree with you, Jim, is that it's not just the rollout of the vaccine. It's also the earlier measures that were taken by the Wolf administration in regards to who was allowed to be open, who was not allowed to be open. Restaurants are open, now they're closed.
True.
I mean, that.
But he's still polling. He's still polling at winnable levels.
Well, that's true.
Despite all that, he's still polling at winnable levels, and that's what you look at.
All right. Let's move on to another topic if we can. Go ahead.
Make a quick observation.
Sure.
If you're following California, you know that Governor Newsom is facing a recall. There's a great deal of discussion. If we had that process here, I think you'd see people going and trying to get a recall of Governor Wolf. If that kind of answers your question as compared to a re-election.
Well, I think you just gave the Republican legislature an idea, Governor. So we'll see if
No.
Can't recall in Pennsylvania.
Can't do it, right?
Well, let's just stay on the state here for a second, though. There are efforts now to change the emergency powers of the governor in the state legislature from, I believe it's 90 days that he can impose these powers down to 21 days. Good idea or bad idea, Governor?
Well, actually, as a result of what's going on, I would consider it. But you have to go back to when this first started. 90 days is kind of appropriate, I think, because after, let's talk about floods and ice storms and stuff, there's a long period of time, 2-3 months afterwards, that you need to work on things. And unfortunately, our Supreme Court, as I recall correctly, overruled a court case that said it ends there. He can't just renew it. I think rather than just say 21 days, I would stick with 90 days. And that if he wants to, and this is where it was, if he wants to renew it, it has to be by a vote of the General Assembly to renew it or to give another one.
Okay.
We have to be very careful that we do not create a situation in which our response to emergencies is going to be done by committee.
Yes.
Because we'll never be able to respond. I mean, we'll be stopped dead in our tracks. We won't get anything done because nothing gets done by committee. So that's why you have these powers residing in the executive. So there can be one person who can make the decision up or down. Now, you may take fault with this executive or that and the way they handled it, but you still need that one point at which one person can make that decision quickly.
This is an attempt. This is a reaction. This legislation is a reaction to this specific governor's response and how he's rolled things out. So it's more indigenous to the situation we're in versus an overall generic concern with the process. So I think the Republicans that are trying to do this, and any Democrats who are going along with it, need to step back for a minute and think, do we totally upend this process because of a specific situation now that we're not necessarily happy with? I don't think you should be doing it in the moment. I think the 90 days is appropriate.
I disagree. I would have no problem for them reducing that time down to 21 days or 30 days. It's 2021. It's not like it's colonial America. It would take forever for people to regather in the state capitol. You could always extend it another 30 days or another 60 days. But I think, every day is going to feel like 100 hours at the time of a crisis. I think 3 weeks or 30 days is sufficient for one man or one woman to act alone before he's required to involve the elected legislature of that particular state. So I don't have a particular problem with narrowing that 3 months down to a shorter period of time before you can involve your colleagues in the Capitol.
I just want to remind my friend Keith of one thing. A camel is a horse designed by a committee.
So I just add to that though. In a normal emergency, let's take a flood. The flood's over in a week or two. And that would be perfect then to have the 21 days. Except for the fact that there is a period of time of cleanup and rebuild and everything, where the emergency powers for that period of time prevents things like price gouging and everything. And to come back in 21 days and say, well, we need to renew it for the cleanup, I don't think makes sense. That's why I would stick with the 90 days, but make my constitutional amendment based upon 90 days. You want to do anything more than that, you got to get permission. You got to file a new one with permission from the legislature, and it would have to be by 2/3 consent of the legislature.
Governor, you and I are on the same page. I mean,
Yep.
The borough of Millville is not, the state of Pennsylvania, but back to the algorithm being very similar. Hurricane Ivan, the floodwaters, maybe 8 to 10 hours of floodwater. But you're my neighbor. You saw how many weeks and weeks and months it took for us to clean up and get back on our feet. You can't just turn that switch off in a couple of days because of the gouging. People coming in charging $8,000 to put plywood up on senior citizens' homes. They would have tried that stuff after 3 weeks. So you need more time.
I favor authoritarian government as long as I'm the authority.
Well stated.
Boy, I'm going to see that quote come back somewhere.
Exactly. All right, let's move on to the federal level for a second here. Last week when we talked, two of you said that the impeachment trial should not take place. Two of you said that it should take place. I don't think we have to take too many wild guesses as to who said what last week. Jim Byrne, though, I did raise this question with you last week. If Mr. Trump is not convicted, what good does this trial really do for the country right now? Because it appears there's not going to be enough votes to convict him as it stands right now.
One of the things we talked about last week when we had this conversation was the paradox that the Democrats and those supporting this find themselves in. The behavior of the former president on January 6th and in the months and actually the years leading up to it with the incendiary rhetoric left them no choice. Yes, everybody talks about unity and folks talk about healing, but you can't take that next step unless you have some overt attempt at accountability for everybody that was involved. And the logic of not doing something because he only had 2 weeks left fails me. I don't see that. I don't follow that. But at the same time, I do not think there are enough votes. I think there may be even less now than there were a couple of weeks ago. But you have to have the accountability that goes with this. What would happen and what message would we be sending if the Democrats and the 10 Republicans who joined us and the Republicans in the Senate who I think will vote to convict had done nothing? The people that are watching this, the domestic terrorists that are watching this, the FBI is elevating the alert levels because they feel emboldened by what happened. And I would suggest they even feel emboldened by what looks to be a non-conviction of one of the people who instigated it. It's only going to get worse. So you have to put people's feet over the coals and punish those who are responsible. He has to be tried. There's no other way. Even if he's not convicted, you have to take that step.
Would a censure work for you?
Yeah, oh, it would. It would. Some type. The constant in my equation is accountability. Some type of an accountability. And if Democrats see that the writing isn't on the wall for a conviction, then tactically, do you want to give this man some type of high ground to run around and argue vindication on whatever social media platform he may be able to find someday? No, you don't want to do that. If a censure is just as effective and you'll get more Republicans to go along with that, then by all means, it's accountability, then do it.
Joe, would you agree?
Yeah, my feelings have evolved on this a bit since we last spoke. I just want to force a vote. I want members of Congress to have to stand up and cast a vote, show us what they believe in, show us if they support the Republic or if they want to give comfort to the enemy, to the insurrectionists, to the cop killers who attacked our Capitol. That's what I want. So, a resolution would do that on censure. Some other vehicle might do that. A vote in the Senate on this article of impeachment might do that. But I say let's take the shortest and course of least resistance. Let's just get a vote. I want to know where everybody stands. Stand up and vote. Show us who you are. Show us what you believe in.
Governor, your thoughts?
Impeachment and an attempt to convict is clearly a political action. And I understand Joe's position. We want to see where you are. The problem is when you vote, it's yes or no. But you may have different reasons. If I were a senator right now, I would be voting because I don't believe we have the power under the Constitution to impeach and convict somebody after they have left office. Well, that took a whole sentence. Do you think that whole sentence is ever going to be out there? And a good Democrat strategist, like two of the colleagues on the line, in future campaigns is going to use that vote one way or the other, and so are the Republicans, as to whether they voted for it or they voted against it, not what the explanation was. So I would go back and say, Jim, why don't they just go to censure right now? It's clear they're not going to go anywhere. The evidence is all the TV tapes that we keep seeing over and over and over again right now. If they could go to censure tomorrow, bring this to a conclusion, get the censure, let President Biden go on with governing. Right now, I think this is a distraction from the president trying to get done what he needs to get done.
Keith, from your perspective, would a censure work with Republicans?
Well, one thing I know is I can safely say all five of us on this call today love America, and we want the best for America. And I think thematically, I don't think any of us would disagree. What we want is some sort of closure. And I would suggest going for censure. I'm having trouble with that word. Going for censure would give us that closure where a full-blown trial would not. I would argue if we'd go through the optics of a full-blown impeachment trial with no chance of getting 67 votes to convict, it would serve to accentuate the divide that already obviously exists in America today, where a censorship could be a sense of allowing a vote to take place, and that there was a sense there was consequences to someone's actions, and it was more fitting what happened than reaching for something you'll never achieve, and then the animus continuing. Because, folks, I agree with Governor Corbett. You know, we just talked about how the vaccine is such a concern for people. The economic equation for people is still in a desperate times. That this wonderful transition, peaceful transition of power, there's anxiety, but there's change now, and people just want to move on. We have to give them the ability to move on, and I think moving this from an impeachment trial to censure is the right thing to do.
It gives the parties who are voting yes or no a little bit more room to explain their vote versus an up or a down, as the governor correctly indicated. That's it.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us on Around the Table, Politics 2021. I'd get into another subject, but we're almost out of time, and sometimes we're not as brief as we need to be. At least I know I'm not. So thanks, and we'll see you again maybe next week.
Thank you.
Good care.
All right, bye-bye.